So Batya Ungar-Sargon, I believe that's how I pronounce her name, is getting not just criticized from the left, but she's also getting criticized from people on the right for this absolute softball of an interview that she done with Ben Shapiro. And it shouldn't be no surprise, but I'll give my reasoning and my thoughts towards the end on that. So let's jump in. Let's not waste any time, and then I'll come back.
Here to discuss is Ben Shapiro, the undisputed victor of the podcast wars, co-founder of The Daily Wire and host of The Ben Shapiro Show. Ben, thank you so much for joining me.
No, thanks for having me.
So Ben, tell us what the podcast wars mean to you and how you won.
So, well, first of all, thanks for the softball. But, when it comes to, the podcast wars, the so-called podcast wars, for some people who are engaging in what people are calling the podcast wars, it really is just about maximization of ratings. It's about making sure that you have the most clicks. And so you'll see people like Megyn Kelly defend her lack of principle by citing her numbers. And you see the same thing from Tucker Carlson. You see it from other figures on this side as well, that this is somehow indicative of broad public purchase for their points of view. The point that I've been making is very similar to the one that you're making, which is that they are just wrong on the merits, and also their positions are fringe positions. And so for me, what I've been saying has nothing to do with wars over sort of turf in the podcast space. My ratings will be what they are, and their ratings will be what they are. I don't judge or adjudicate truth based on ratings. But I think that what you have seen is that this is a small splinter faction of the Republican Party that is really attempting an ideological coup against President Trump. Some of them, I have to say, are ballsier than others. Some of them, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, will go up directly against the president. Others, like Tucker Carlson or Megyn Kelly, will avoid saying Trump's name. They'll say that Trump is being manipulated by the Israelis or by nefarious media figures like Mark Levin or like me to do what he's doing. The reality is that what they do not like is that President Trump is doing what he is doing, and they wish that he would do something differently, but they don't want to challenge him openly for leadership of a MAGA movement that he created, he leads, and he defines.
I think we can agree that while it's ridiculous to suggest that Trump has been forced into this, undermined into this, tricked into this operation against Iran, our interests are aligned with Israel, but our objectives are not necessarily identical to theirs. Despite the enormous cooperation we've had, I actually think that DNI Tulsi Gabbard put this very well in the hearings that she had this week. I want you to take a look at that and then respond and see if you agree with her.
The Israeli government has been focused on disabling the Iranian leadership and taking out several members, obviously beginning with the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, and they continue to focus on that effort.
How does that differ from our goals?
The president has stated that his objectives are to destroy Iran's ballistic missile launching capability.
Do you agree with that assessment?
I think in large part, yes. I think the United States has said over and over what its goals are. And our goals here in the United States are to disable the ballistic missile testing and production facilities, as well as their ability to fire them. It's to defenestrate their terrorist arms. It is to get rid of their nuclear program. It is to get rid of their Navy and their Air Force. And in this, we've been largely successful. I think that the Israeli goal, obviously, sort of the unstated goal, but pretty much clearly the goal, is a regime change in Iran. The question there is, I think, one more of timeline than it is of goal. I think the United States would love to see, I think Trump administration would love to see a replacement of the Iranian regime with something friendlier or with a regime that changes its behavior dramatically. I think the question is what the timeline there looks like. And as I've been saying on my program, I think that one of the big wins here would be a weakened Iranian regime that falls in 6 months or a year. I mean, it was 2 years from when the president of the United States said in the 1980s that the wall should fall in Berlin to when the actual wall fell in Berlin. There is a delay period that can happen here that would effectuate the goal that Israel is looking for. I think Israel is looking for a more immediate change. But sure, I mean, I think there can be differences in goal, even if the alignment is 95% of the way there.
I think another thing that's been totally erased from the mainstream media's coverage of this war, in addition to the massive military success that we've had, has been the ways in which the moderate Gulf Muslim states have really urged the president to keep going, have had his back. The Saudis were part of a coalition that included Israel that pushed for this behind the scenes. Of course, they didn't make that publicly known. Instead of covering that, the media has focused on this question of, was the threat from Iran imminent. And that became the focal point of a lot of the hearings this week. Joe Kent, of course, came out and said they weren't imminent. There's sort of discourse that Tulsi Gabbard and Vice President J.D. Vance believe that the threats were not imminent, as opposed to other people like Marco Rubio. Do you believe, A, that the threat from Iran was imminent to the United States, and B, is that even an important question?
And so I'll answer the first one, the second question first. That is a really stupid question, because I do not believe that we ought to wait until threats are directly at our front door, armed with ballistic missiles tipped with nuclear weapons, in order to act, or until the moment before, because presumably if you wait long enough, it makes it much more difficult to actually prevent that from becoming the kind of immediate threat that could do damage to the American homeland. As far as whether Iran was an immediate threat, I think we have to distinguish here between an immediate threat to the American homeland and an immediate threat to America's interests. Clearly, Iran was an immediate threat to America's interests. They've thrown the entire region into turmoil for 47 years and been responsible for the murders of at least hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans over time, including American civilians. They're the chief state sponsor of terrorism all over the globe. And so to suggest that that's not an imminent threat, it's not imminent. It is immediate. It is real, and it was happening in real time. The real thing that happened here, I think, was that there was a target of opportunity that had been long time in coming. The fact is that the United States was very concerned that ballistic missile capacity was rising so fast inside Iran, as well as the nuclear program was moving so quickly, that it would soon become very difficult to act. And an opportunity was provided by the destruction of the Iranian air defense capability back in the 12-day war, as well as these gigantic protests out in the streets that demonstrated full scale that the Iranian people would like for the regime to go. And so I think President Trump made the wise decision that when you have a window of opportunity, when you have a weak foe, and when you have an overwhelming military advantage, that's a good time to go. You don't have to wait until the robber is inside your house, outside your bedroom door.
Now, one of Iran's remaining leverage points is the Strait of Hormuz, which is effectively closed right now, through which 90% of the oil comes through. We don't need that oil. We are a net exporter of gas, but the Europeans do, and yet they seem to be refusing to assist us in this operation in a very similar way to the Democrats, it seems to me. You have the Europeans and the Democrats both insisting, yes, of course, it is better that Iran not have a nuclear weapon, and yet reserving the right to oppose any efforts to prevent that from happening, reserving the right to whine and moan and complain about it, and maintain this sort of moral superiority while freeloading off of the Trump administration's efforts. Trump seems to be having had enough of this already. He had to put out a tweet. We have that expressing his complete frustrations with NATO and their freeloading. What has been your reaction to this? Here we have it. NATO is a paper tiger. They didn't want to join the fight. What is your reaction to this? Do you think that they will ultimately join us? Will they show up, or are they going to continue to do as the Democrats do, which is, pretend that they support these goals while also refusing to actually help?
I mean, it's incredibly European to usher in, the unbelievably evil regimes that we've seen throughout history, but signify that they're very much opposed with a strongly worded letter. And that is what they did over the course of the last 24 hours. Or a group of nations, including Japan and some other nations as well, that put out this strongly worded letter saying that Iran should really stop being very, very mean. And meanwhile, they're doing nothing to actually stop Iran, and in fact are inhibiting American efforts to stop Iran. My response to this is that I really believe that the president should authorize the taking of Kharga Island, which is where 90% of Iranian oil is shipped. It is the chief mechanism by which Iran is able to supply itself with money. And then we ought to take control of that. We ought to put American companies in charge of it. We should basically do with Kharga Island precisely what we have done with Venezuela. And then we should throttle the Iranian government into leaving the Strait of Hormuz alone. And if they will not do that, then we ought to simply seize that oil and use it how we see fit. And as for the Europeans, if the Europeans wish to continue to suffer high prices, that's their prerogative. They have a supply problem. We do not have a supply problem. We have a price problem because obviously when you have less oil on the market, prices go up generally because oil is a global market. But we don't have an actual supply problem in the sense that we're going to experience severe shortages of oil or natural gas in the United States. The Europeans have an actual supply problem. They don't just have a price problem. And so the fact that they are being so skittish about helping us to finish off the regime's capabilities in the Strait of Hormuz, again, it just demonstrates once and for all that allies who are unwilling to fight at our side are typically not worth their salt.
One of the big remaining questions is whether the president can complete this operation without putting boots on the ground I wouldn't support boots on the ground. I think a lot of this 90%, 85% Republican support would start to evaporate if, God forbid, something happened in a big way to our troops. Where are you on this question, and do you think that it's going to come to that?
So I think that boots on the ground versus not boots on the ground is too hard a binary. I think that very often we think of no boots on the ground in the Middle East, and there are, of course, boots on the ground in the Middle East, operating the aircraft, maintaining bases. The idea that if we unleash some special operators to take Kharg Island and there were effectively zero casualties or low casualties, the American public would be outraged. I think that is, I think, an overstatement. I would also not be in favor of unleashing 100,000 American troops Iraq war style to simply invade Tehran and march all the way to the capital. That I think Americans would oppose broad scale. But the idea of special operators operating in small numbers, special operators on America's behalf are operating in legitimately 100 countries around the globe right now. And so I think that's a bit of a different story than the sort of so-called, binary gap between boots on the ground. What I would say is special operators probably I'm fine with. Anything that is more than that, gigantic military landings on the beaches of Iran, that I think would be a mistake.
Ben Shapiro, the second most vindicated man in America after Donald Trump, and the clear winner of the podcast wars. God bless and protect you. Thank you so much for being here.
Honestly, that interview was embarrassing. And Batya Ungar-Sargon, whatever her name is, crowning Ben Shapiro as the winner of the podcast wars was just embarrassing. It was just embarrassing. And it was a bit like, it was actually, guys, it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing. Like, I'm so confused. The channel is called News Nation. Nothing about that was news. Batya, the host of her show, Batya, she didn't push back on absolutely anything. And that's the reason as to why some people that are criticizing this interview are calling it a bit of an echo chamber. Because the reality is this, it's two Zionists who are having a conversation who both believe the exact same thing and who are both glad that Donald Trump is doing the bidding of Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel. That's all that this is. This is two Zionists just talking in an echo chamber. And the reality is this, the problem is both of them, when it comes to their ideologies, they align. They're lying. And the reality is this, I literally think that when clips like these are done, interviews like these are done, all it does is it just reinforces and it's trying to propagandize the American public to stand in solidarity with Israel. That's all it does. Honestly, that's it. The fact that she absolutely didn't challenge any of Ben Shapiro's talking points, like literally any, speaks volumes in of itself. It really does. It speaks volumes. But like I said, it shouldn't be a surprise. This is what happens when the mainstream media no longer becomes news. It becomes a way and a means for people to be able to push foreign policy that benefits Israel over the United States of America. Because this is what this is about. This is exactly what this is about. This benefits Israel more than it benefits the United States. And the people that are paying for it the most is the United States. Israel have a reason behind why they're trying to do what they're doing. So them suffering with certain things, that's just a given. But the United States, they're not, like they didn't need to be a part of this. And that's the reason as to why people on the left, people on the right, they wholeheartedly agree that Benjamin Netanyahu pushed Donald Trump into making this decision. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section about this clip. Let me know. I want to hear your guys' perspective, your guys' point of view. Like I said, Batya is receiving a lot of flack from this. So I want to know what your guys' thoughts are. Let me know down in the comment section below. While you guys are down there, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. Also, turn on the bell notification. Give the video a thumbs up. And if you would be willing to, hype the video up. Let's push it out, get it in front of as many people as possible. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next clip.